Hey everyone, welcome into the FantasyPros Dynasty Football Podcast presented by Reality Sports Online. My name is Kyle Yates and I am your host. I'm joined as always by the man, the myth, the legend, Ray Garvin. Ray, how's it going, man?
Doing well, Yates. How you doing this evening, brother?
I'm good, man. We are, it's always a good day to talk Dynasty, so I'm happy to be here with you. We are going to go through some news items that broke. Of course, nothing as extensive as what we did last episode, going over a week's worth of news, anything like that, but we've got something fun on the docket for tonight. That is a one-round Superflex rookie mock draft. Now, we did a rookie mock draft just last week, I think, and that was a 1 QB format, so this one now, we're going to get some quarterbacks going. We're going to see how many we can get going in the first round. We'll be walking through that in just a little bit, but then we're also going to be taking a look at some players that you should sell now before it's too late in Dynasty. So, of course, we're going to be talking about that later on, but first want to mention that you can find Ray on Twitter at RayGQ, that's QUE, and I can be found on Twitter as well at KyleY NFL. All right, man, so some news items that broke. Kenny Gallaudet expected to be franchise tagged per Ian Rappaport. Now, we talked about Kenny Gallaudet on the last episode, which is a free agency primer, and saying, you know, if he does hit the open market, here are some destinations. Well, it looks like he is going to be franchise tagged. Of course, we'll wait for the official word there. But Kenny Gallaudet, now with Tyrell Williams, also agreed to a one-year deal, $6.2 million with the Detroit Lions. So if Kenny Galladay's back, if Tyrell Williams is back, and then Quintez Cephas, they spend an early round pick on a wide receiver, well, suddenly that's not looking like such a bad of a wide receiver core for Jared Goff next season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's going to have weapons. And then you got Hawkinson, you got DeAndre Swift in the backfield. I know a lot of people are not the biggest Goff fans, but, you know, he's going to be the starting quarterback, and he's going to have some weapons there in Detroit.
Absolutely. David Johnson and the Texans have agreed to a restructured deal. Now, this was crucial with, of course, just the salary cap in general. But then David Johnson, for the amount of production that he had last season, his age, everything like that, it was a pretty inflated contract. So the Texans have agreed to restructure that deal. David Johnson will be back in Houston next season. Now, who's going to be his quarterback is a whole other question that will drastically affect his fantasy output. The Minnesota Vikings have released Kyle Rudolph. Now, Kyle Rudolph has been with the Minnesota Vikings for the past 10 seasons, I think. It was something crazy like that. Well, there's a young tight end sitting behind him that when he's gotten the opportunity, he's flashed, and that's Irv Smith. So from a dynasty perspective now, no Kyle Rudolph above him on the depth chart. What does this do for Irv Smith's dynasty stock?
This has got to elevate him. I mean, when you're talking about the tight end landscape overall, it's not, you know, it isn't super deep in the first place. So I would actually, you know, slide Irv Smith up a couple of spots. You know, I love me some Robert Tonyan, but he'd be over Tonyan. He'd be over Evan Ingram, Gesicki, and then that Hunter Henry, Dallas Goedert range for me. Yeah,
I mean that's crazy high, right? Like, talking about you saying over Robert Tonyan, like, I completely agree. And in that range of a Dallas Goedert and Hunter Henry, well, that's still a very, very fantasy viable option compared to what he has been. Now, the Minnesota Vikings are going to run heavy 12 personnel. There's going to be 2 tight ends on the field, so whether that is Tyler Conklin or whether they bring someone else in the draft or whatever, but I do expect that if Irv Smith gets this opportunity to be the main guy, which it is looking like that's the case, then it's wheels up, man. I think a top 10, top 12 for sure, dynasty tight end moving forward. Additionally, Jared Cook has been officially released by the Saints. Now, Jared Cook was heading towards free agency anyway, but this is just kind of for semantics. He's officially gone from the team. I would expect him to retire at this point. Whether he his dynasty outlook and, you know, fantasy relevance, I think is just, it's done. But want to talk about Adam Troutman here, the backup tight end out of, what was he, Dayton last year?
Dayton.
Yeah. Adam Troutman was someone who flashed, certainly on film. Now, he needed a year to kind of acclimate. Of course, rookie tight ends always need that year to acclimate to the NFL, but him coming out of Dayton needed that even more. Flashed when he got the opportunity. What does this do now for Adam Troutman? Are we putting him all the way up there with Irv Smith, or is he in a lower tier?
Nah, he's in a lower tier, but I'll tell you this. I think he's tremendously talented in you know, small spurts last year. Very small sample size. He looked good when he was on the field, and I believe we talked about Jared Cook on the last show, Yates. So this is what we were kind of hoping for, and now he should roll into the season as the starting tight end for the Saints. It's a good offense, regardless of who's playing quarterback. Well, maybe not regardless. If it's Taysom Hill, I don't know how that affects anybody, but I think this is good. for Adam Troutman. He's not in the Irv Smith range. I would still have, Robert Tonyan ranked ahead of him, but, I think he's right there with some of those higher end second tier rookie tight ends in that, tight end 15, 16 range.
Yeah, I think that I definitely don't want to have Adam Troutman as like my tight end 1 heading into next season in my Dynasty League. But yet, as a tight end 2, tight end 3 on my roster, I'm really excited for him moving forward because he does have the talent. Now it's looking like he's going to get the opportunity. Additionally, the Giants released Golden Tate, so Golden Tate no longer a member of the New York Giants. They've got a wide receiver opening there in New York. Now, are they going to spend an early pick on that? Is Devonte Smith, Jalen Waddle at number 11 overall in the cards, or did they add someone else later on in the draft? But we're going to see someone step in to that slot role in New York next season. And then finally wrapping it up here, Russell Wilson. This came out earlier today. Russell Wilson is not actively being shopped, but Seattle has answered calls. So, right, even Monday, right, we recorded that last episode on Monday, and we were talking about what's the percentage chance of either, who gets traded first, or was it Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson? It's looking like it's a 90% chance at this point that Russell Wilson is not playing in Seattle next year.
Yeah, and I think when we dive into the show a little bit deeper, I may be bringing up one Russell Wilson in a segment of our show, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. There's a teaser for later. All right, so let's get into a Superflex rookie mock draft. Now, Superflex, for those who are unfamiliar, and again, we wanted to talk about, when we set out to do this podcast, we want to talk to all people that are playing Dynasty, right? Whether you are just joining Dynasty for the first time or you've been playing forever. So Superflex is where you have one quarterback locked in, and then you have a flex spot that is the Superflex spot, right, where you're able to start another quarterback, but you're not locked into one. That would be a 2 QB league. So you can certainly start a running back, wide receiver there, but in a Superflex format with quarterbacks, you typically start 2 quarterbacks, right? So this drastically changes the mock draft and the order of these players from what we did on our rookie mock draft a couple weeks ago in a 1 QB format. You're not going to see, I don't think we even put a quarterback in the first round. I don't think Trevor Lawrence even made it in there. So this one, drastically different. This pushes the price and the value of quarterbacks way up. So let's start it out here. We're going to switch up the order from what we did last time. I have the 101. In a Superflex league, man, I'm taking quarterbacks. I'm hoarding quarterbacks if I'm playing in a Superflex league. And if I've got the 101, I'm going to take the QB1 in this class. There are people that have Zach Wilson above Trevor Lawrence and Kellen Mond, and that's a whole other situation. We'll just leave it at that. But, no, I'm taking Trevor Lawrence here at the 101. Okay. I'm not going to waver off of this one, man. I'm going to stay put. I'm going to take Trevor Lawrence to add to my Dynasty roster that, assuming that I'm picking at the 101, needs a lot of help.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, but you held the course. You did the right thing here, Yates, and I think Trevor Lawrence is a solid selection. I mean, he is, in my opinion, in Superflex formats. I know there's these different takes that if you don't have to take a quarterback with the first pick, but I just think that would be a mistake in this situation. So Trevor Lawrence is the 101 in Superflex. Should be 99.9% of the time.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask you a question before we move off of Trevor Lawrence here really quick. Now, in a startup Superflex draft, where are we looking at Trevor Lawrence? Is he in the first-round conversation in a startup in a Superflex league? Or, because I got the question earlier on Twitter today, like, if you could have the ability in your startup to draft picks, right, rather than the actual player, if you draft the 101 in your rookie draft or whatever, it's the same thing. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence pretty much across the board. Where should he go is really the question that I want to ask you.
Yates, I'm in 2 Superflex Dynasty startup drafts, not mock drafts, legitimate drafts for money right now, and Trevor Lawrence did not fall past the 108 in either of those drafts. He went 105 in one and 108 in the other draft.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's where he's going. I think he's going to be a first-round pick, and I know much to the chagrin of a lot, he went ahead of players like Joe Burrow and Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson. So I've seen him go as high as 105 and as late as 108 in 2 current Dynasty startups that I'm in right now.
That's crazy, man. For me, that's a little bit too rich. I'd probably like to have him as my QB2. I want that more proven veteran commodity as my QB1. But, I mean, if he's going there, that's pushing a veteran QB down at the next turn, I could get another solid quarterback to be my QB2 at that point. So, all right, anyway, so now the 102 here, you're up. Are we going Zach Wilson? Are we going another quarterback? Or are we going to go Najee Harris?
What about Mac Jones? You didn't even mention Mac Jones.
I'm so sorry, man. Mac Jones at the 102. Let me write that down. All right, I'm up at the 103.
No, I can't steer. I love me some Mac Jones, but I wouldn't dare steer the good people that listen to the show in the wrong direction here. And for me at the 102 with Trevor Lawrence off of the board, my quarterback too, I know that he's taking a lot of heat on the Twitter for whatever reason right now, but I am not wavering in my conviction, and I am going to go Justin Fields, quarterback out of Ohio State, the dual threat quarterback. Just phenomenal game. I mean, game of the ages versus Clemson in the semifinal game. Literally one of the best college quarterback performances of all time. I'm a big believer in his talent, and by all NFL mock draft, analysts, they're saying he's going to fall down the board. And you know what? The last time we saw a talented quarterback that had dual threat capability fall down the board, we ended up with Lamar Jackson to the Ravens. So give me Justin Fields at the 102, and I'm not thinking twice about it.
No, and especially for fantasy football, when you talk about Justin Fields' rushing capability and how valuable that is, I mean, not only is he just, like you talked about Lamar Jackson falling all the way to 32, right, and Baltimore trading back up into the first round to get him. I mean, Justin Fields is so much better of a passer, in my opinion, than Lamar Jackson coming out of Louisville. So I think Justin Fields at this point, I am perfectly fine taking him at the 102. I still think that he's in the – I think there's a tier gap, right, where Justin Fields is my QB3. Now I'm going to take my QB2 here at the 103 because, again, we talk about the rushing ability and how valuable that is. And I just wanted to mention that from the perspective of what Justin Fields can do on the field as a rusher, but then also what he can do through the air, has the ability to send it all over the field. Cannon of an arm. So really, really love this pick. I mentioned it. I'm going to take my QB2 here, and that is Trey Lance. Now, Trey Lance is getting crapped on as just as much as Justin Fields, and I really do not understand why. When we look at Trey Lance, not only does he have, I think as soon as he touches the NFL football field for whatever team, he's going to have the type of arm that is immediately in the conversation of a Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. If you watch his tape, he can send it 60-plus yards down the field on a freaking rope, but then also has the ability to stripe it in sideline to sideline. Not only that, he is an incredible runner. Like, you are going, whatever team takes him is going to design QB runs every single week. Now, I don't think it's going to be to the level of Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts and what he did as a scrambler, right? But Trey Lance and what he can do on the ground is extremely, extremely valuable, mirrored with what he can do as a passer. So even if he ends up sitting or ends up like being drafted behind another QB that he'll be in competition with, let's just say Carolina, right, with Teddy Bridgewater, I think they enter into training camp and Trey Lance is going to push him right away. And I think Trey Lance will see the field sooner than later. So it's obviously going to depend on where he ends up in the NFL draft. That will dictate where exactly he goes. But as of right now, I'm going to stay true to my board, and I'm going to take Trey Lance here at the 103.
Man, I love it, Yates, and I'm on record of saying I believe he has the strongest arm in the class. I really do. I think he's got a stronger arm than Fields and Lawrence and Wilson. He's got an absolute cannon attached to his shoulder. One of the criticisms that I had of Trey Lance when going through his film in 2019 was taking a little off of it on those intermediate passes. I mean, he is rifling that thing. But you know what? That's easy things that can be coached. I think he's the best running quarterback in this class. I think he's a better rushing quarterback than Justin Fields. The only thing that's stopping me from having Lance over Fields is just the level of competition for me and maybe the acclimation period. But you know what? That's super nitpicky, super subjective, and it may not be an issue at all. And he's 6'4", 230 pounds, and he is, again, the best rushing quarterback in this class. He's a thickly built kid. He can make every single throw. He is, the only thing that we need to see from Trey Lance is just his ability to adapt from the FCS level to the NFL game. But you know what? Every last one of these quarterbacks, from Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones to Zach Wilson, they're all going to have to adjust to the NFL game. And, Trey Lance is special.
Yeah, I mean, really, and the thing to keep in mind when you're watching his 2019 tape, which is just spectacular, by the way, when you sit down and watch and look at his numbers too, I think off the top of my head, 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, added like 1,100 yards on the ground too, and another 14 touchdowns. Again, that's all off the top of my head. I could be wrong, but just ridiculous production. He's 19 years old when he's doing that. Now, the game that he played in 2020 against Central Arkansas is not great. Like I'm the biggest Trey Lance supporter out there, I guess. So I guess like I'll be perfectly willing to admit that 2020 tape is not good. But you have to take into account that was their only game. Yeah. And in a weird, super crazy season, and who knows how much practice time they got and how rusty he was, everything. I'm not willing to take that too much into account. Now, you talk about the Justin Fields and what he did in the college football playoffs. Absolutely. I mean, I mentioned it. I'm perfectly fine with taking him at the 102, but I don't want to let Trey Lance fall too far down boards. I'm taking him here at the 103. Now, you're up at the 104. Are we going to go 4 for 4 with quarterbacks here, or do we start to see some of the skill positions go off the board?
We are not. We are going to pivot to the number one player on my board in single quarterback leagues, and he's the highest ranked guy left for me, and that's running back Naja Harris. So I got him in the single quarterback mock, and I'm really happy to grab him right here at the 104. I mean, just a special running back, you guys. He's a professional runner. I think he's got the highest likelihood. If there is going to be a running back drafted in the first round of the NFL draft, I do believe it's going to be Najee Harris. And if he's not taken in the first round, you better bet your bottom dollar he'll be coming off real early in the second round. Can catch the ball out of the backfield. Size to be a traditional bell cow. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal player.
Completely agree, and I love taking him here at the 104 because that is tremendous value. If you're a team that's sitting at the 104, you probably have your quarterbacks in place, right? And at that point, you're just looking to reload heading into next season. You get Najee Harris, who can be, I think, an RB1 in fantasy. Only just in like 2 years down, no, like next season. I think that absolute landing spot will play a role in that, of course, but yet I think he has the talent to be that right out of the gate. Now, 105, I'm sitting here, and I've got on my board in Superflex leagues, I've got a player up here at the top of my board. I'm looking at the quarterback position with Zach Wilson. He's a little bit further down. I'm not going to reach for my quarterback here. I don't know what your thoughts are on Zach Wilson. I'm sure we'll talk about him here in the first round, but I'm going to stay true to my board. I'm going to take Jamar Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU. And we've talked about him on previous podcasts, but for everything that we talk about Justin Jefferson and what he did in his rookie season with the Minnesota Vikings, like it's really important to remember that Jamar Chase outproduced Justin Jefferson in 2019. Now, he opted out of the 2020 college football season to, just for COVID reasons and everything like that, and just to prep and prepare for the NFL draft. If he had played in 2020, now the team wasn't as great, of course, but yeah, I still think that we would have just no questions. Lock it in. Jamar Chase is a top 5 NFL draft pick. He needs to be considered a top 5 draft pick in rookie mocks across the board, regardless of format. So Jamar Chase here, 106. I feel really happy, or 105, excuse me. I feel really happy to get him off the board.
Did you see the picture? Did you happen to see the picture of Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and DeVonta Smith? They were kind of standing after a workout together. Did you happen to see that picture, Yates?
I have not seen that.
Oh my gosh, Chase is built like he looks like a safety. Like he looks like LeBron
Is this
Landry.
like is this on the level of the DK Metcalf and AJ Brown picture from a couple years ago?
No, because Smith and Jefferson don't come close to what AJ Brown looked like. But when you look at Chase, I mean, literally, he's just a ball of muscle. And I have made adjustments to my rankings. I have 2 wide receivers at the wide receiver 1 spot. Jamar Chase is one of those players, and the guy that I'm going to take right here at the 105, at the 106 spot is tied for me at wide receiver 1 in this class, and that's Devonte Smith, the wide receiver out of Alabama, reigning Heisman Trophy winner. For as great as Jamar Chase was in 2019, and you just talked about how good he was and how good Justin Jefferson was, Devonta Smith outproduced him in one less game and without the weaponry around him, without Joe Burrow in a 60-touchdown season, the greatest college quarterback season of all time, without Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Well, he had Najee Harris, so let me correct that. But you get what I'm saying. He did not have all of that talent around him, and he outproduced and broke every single record that Jamar Chase set in 2019. I think Smitty is a phenomenal pro prospect.
Holy crap, man. Holy crap. You can fit 3 of my calves inside of Jamar Chase's calves.
Did you see it? You saw it?
I just looked it up. Oh, my word,
dude. For those of you who haven't seen it, just pause the show and just type in Jamar Chase picture. Like, it's phenomenal. But I'm going to take my second wide receiver one, Devonte Smith, as I head over to Twitter during the show to look at that picture myself.
No hesitation here to take Devonte Smith. I mean, all 3 of these receivers that we're going to talk about, as far as Jamar Chase, Devonte Smith, and Jalen Waddle, all 3 of them have the chance to be very, very special. I think it's split in hairs when we're talking about which one of them is wide receiver 1 or what order we have them. I don't care. Yeah. Like, all 3 of them are going to be just fantastic in the NFL. So absolutely, Devonte Smith off the board. So just to recap, Trevor Lawrence at the 101, Justin Fields at the 102, Trey Lance, Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, and then Devonte Smith. Now, at the 107, I think this is a little bit of a slide here compared to, especially for people who have Zach Wilson ranked above the other 3 guys that we've got. I'm going to take the quarterback here. Even though I'm sitting at the 107, I've got a pretty good team, probably was in the playoffs or at least pushing for it. Got a pretty solid team. You know what? I'm going to make sure that I at least continue to soak up value. And for me, I'm going to take Zach Wilson. Now, I think there are reasons to be concerned with Zach Wilson. I think there are things that he definitely has to work on. There is a ton of projection to his game, especially when you take into account, for everything that we talk about Trey Lance and the talent level concerns and all this, that was there with Zach Wilson playing BYU. Like, the talent level and the teams that he played this past season wasn't exactly like he was playing Alabama, Georgia, and Florida defenses in SEC competition every single week. So I think there are reasons to be concerned, but yet this is enough of a slide and enough value for me to take Zach Wilson, especially if the NFL does see him as a top 3 NFL draft pick, potentially even pushing the 101, which I completely disagree with. But at that point, this is enough of a slide for me. I'm going to take Zach Wilson at the 107.
Yeah, and I think this is what's going to happen. And honestly, in Superflex leagues, in certain Dynasty leagues, I can see Zach Wilson going ahead of DeVonta Smith because it seems like he has this cult following around him right now. And if he's selected number 2 overall to the New York Jets, listen, I could see Zach Wilson in certain Dynasty leagues going as high as the 102 spot right after Trevor Lawrence. And, I'm just not there. I understand that he has all the arm talent in the world, but what most NFL prospect quarterbacks do, right? Like, most of these guys do have arm talent. I think this is good value for Zach Wilson, but for me personally, I'm not there with him. I have him as quarterback 5. I like Mac Jones ahead of Zach Wilson, not by much, but this is what's going to happen, and it's going to push that value down. And right here at the 108 spot, I think I'm going to take the most dominant player, I believe, at his position in this entire class. I think you can kind of argue quarterback 1s. You can argue the running backs. You can argue the wide receivers. I don't think you can argue who the best tight end in this class is. And I'm going to take Kyle Pitts right here at the 108 spot. I've seen him go as high as like 104, or 105. I think that's a little too rich for my taste for the tight end position. But here in the middle, towards the back half of the first round, I have no problem taking what I believe is a top 5 Dynasty tight end here at the 108.
Yeah, I just released my Dynasty Big Board 1.0 on FantasyPros earlier this week, and part of my system is assigning the grades based on tape, and then I'll go in and calculate and kind of depress certain positions, of course, and elevate the running back position because of the importance of it in fantasy football and all this stuff. And even with depressing or decreasing the value of the tight end position with Kyle Pitts' grade, he was still number 3 overall on my big board, right? Yeah. So, but again, that's in consideration. You don't have to draft Kyle Pitts there. That's just telling you that this is the talent level that we're dealing with. With Pitts entering the NFL, I think whatever offense takes him within the top 15 NFL draft picks is going to have a clear plan for him, whether that is lining him up lining him out wide, we've compared him to Calvin Johnson, and I think those comparisons are fair. Like, he can play on the outside and have that level of impact, or he can line up on the inside, attach to the formation and be a competent blocker, but then run seam routes and overs and everything. He can just be a true 3-level threat. So really excited about Kyle Pitts. I think this is good value for him at the 108. Now I'm looking at the board. I've got a couple of options here. I could go running back. There's a couple of running backs that are sitting on the board. And I think that I'm going to elevate that position over the wide receiver position, even though I do like Jalen Waddle a lot. And again, I talked about it with Jamar Chase and Devonte Smith. I'm fine with any of those guys. I'm going to take here Javonte Williams.
I thought I was going to be able to get him. I hedged, and I thought I was going to get him. Damn you, Yates.
Yeah, I think that for me, Travis Etienne, the difference between Etienne and Javonte Williams is pretty damn close in my rankings here. So I'm fine with either one of these guys. Flip a coin. It's going to depend on their landing spot, which one goes higher in the NFL draft. That'll kind of split that tie. But for right now, I'm going to switch it up just a little bit here, and I'm going to take Javonte Williams. Bowling ball of a prospect is how we've described him. Incredible contact balance, incredible vision between the tackles, able to be a receiver out of the backfield as well. So has the ability to be a 3-down workhorse in the NFL. Great size for the position. So I think Javonte Williams, whatever NFL team gets him in the second or maybe even the third round, just because of the running back position and how it's valued, is getting an absolute steal. And I think that he's going to be a 220, plus touch player a season. And if that's the case, getting him here at the 109 is great value.
Normally, during these exercises, they're just for fun and, you don't take it too seriously. But I'm pretty upset right now because I really did hedge thinking that I'd be able to grab Javonte Williams with my next pick because I thought for sure you were going Rashod Bateman. I was just like, I know Yates is going to go Rashod Bateman.
I gotta keep you on your toes, man.
I'm not happy about this. And I'm in a conundrum right here because my heart wants to go with one of my favorite players in this class, which is Rondale Moore. That's what I want to do, right? But the wide receiver position is so deep. It's so deep. And the running back position is not so deep. It is very shallow. It is kiddie level pool depth of water. So I have to take the running back. He's a tier 1 running back prospect for me. He is behind Javonte Williams and Naja Harris, clearly. But Travis Etienne is still a talented player. He's still a phenomenal prospect, exceptional acceleration and speed, great contact balance, can catch the ball out of the backfield, and I do believe he's going to get day 2 draft capital at worst, and I'm talking second round. So right here at the 110 spot, if you're telling me I get Travis Etienne on my team, sign me up, baby. I'm all for it.
Yeah, we've talked about Etienne before and saying that I don't think that he has the potential to be you're going to give him a Derrick Henry or a Dalvin Cook type workload on the ground, but his receiving ability has improved drastically over his college career, and has become an extremely reliable receiver out of the backfield. So he has the potential to have, and again, I'm not comparing him to Alvin Kamara, but saying that type of impact for fantasy football, that's someone who I think that type of workload, right, as far as the receiver out of the backfield, can be heavily targeted, also receive some work on the ground, each game, but I think that's what Travis Etienne can be. So 110 here, we're starting to see, and this is the fun in doing these Superflex formats and different rookie mocks, because for people who haven't played Superflex yet, you can see how different this plays out compared to your 1 QB leagues, your typical leagues, right? You're seeing Najee Harris go at the 101 in 1 QB leagues, Travis Etienne at the 103, Javonte Williams at the 104. Like, these guys are falling, and I'm looking at the last 2 spots here, Ray. We're going to have some really talented players fall outside of the first round that we're not even going to be able to talk about here tonight. So it's a tough decision here for me to say, looking at the 111 where I've got, we talked about Rashod Bateman. I mean, Rondale Moore for sure. Do I elevate the running back position and look at a guy like Kenneth Gainwell, who has the potential to be just a monster in terms of PPR formats and a receiver out of the backfield? But I can't pass up Jalen Waddle and let him get to you at the 112, right? And again, staying true to my board, looking at my rankings, Waddle has to go off the board here for me. So he has to get inside the first round. I think that he should go way higher than this. But again, looking at the board and who we selected, it's just hard to find a spot for him. So Jalen Waddle at the 111, man, if I'm a competing team, and obviously I was in, if I have the 111 and that's my pick, like I was in the championship. I came super close to winning it last year. And if I add Jalen Waddle, I feel like that's just cheating.
I mean, as we do, it never ceases to amaze me how these Superflex mock drafts play out, because there are at least 3 or 4 players where I'm like, they should be first round picks. But as I look at the board, who are you going to bump out? And this is why Superflex is so fun, and this is why second round picks in Dynasty rookie drafts this year are going to be so valuable, because right here at the 112 spot, I knew that you wouldn't select him, and I think this is incredible value to get a potential top 10, top 15 NFL draft pick at the quarterback position at the 112 spot. And if we were going 2 rounds deep, I probably would pass on Mac Jones here as well, but because I think I'd be able to get him at the 202 spot. So right here at 112, to get Mac Jones, I just think it's, everything that we're hearing, we're seeing report after report after report of Jalen Waddle, Devonte Smith, Najee Harris saying they preferred Mac Jones over Tua. We're seeing reports that he could potentially go 8 overall to the Panthers, that Kuiper and the talking heads are saying this dude is going to be a top 10 pick. And again, Yates, I believe that if this were a real rookie draft, you still would see players like Rondale Moore, Rashod Bateman, draft maybe even a Kadarius Toney drafted ahead of a Mac Jones, which just to get a top 10 quarterback at the 203, 204 spot, that's regardless if you like him or not. Hell, you got to take that value, man.
Oh, completely. And I think this is important to talk about. Like, if you are doing these drafts, now I don't personally condone's not the right word, but like propose or like am in favor of this, where you do your rookie draft before the actual NFL draft, not in favor. But if you are in that situation and you are doing your rookie draft prior to the NFL draft, this is a situation where I actually would be comfortable taking Mac Jones at the 112. Now, even though I have questions about Mac Jones and as far as how the NFL views him, man, you just talked about it. The NFL, like all the news surrounding Mac Jones is indicating that I'm too low on him. Now, I'm still going to hold true to my evaluation, and we'll see how that plays out in a couple of years, and we'll see, and we'll evaluate, and I'll go back to the drawing board if it doesn't work out, all this stuff. But yet, at this point, the risk of drafting Mac Jones, like there's very little risk, is how I want to say this, at the 112, because what happens if he does go as a top 10 NFL draft pick? Well, you got an absolute freaking steal in a Superflex league at the 112. If he doesn't go in the top 32 picks or whatever, which is looking highly unlikely at this point, if he doesn't have a great NFL, who cares? It's the last pick of the first round. Like, it's not going to set you back drastically for years in your dynasty league. So I think this is a fantastic spot to take Mac Jones. I knew that you were going to I knew that you were going to get him in here at one point, at whatever point in the first round. Really happy that you did, because I think that there's very little risk selecting him here at this point, because it could pay off in a big way. Now, looking at the guys, we were talking about it, we talked about a few of them that didn't make it inside the first round, and it just points to how much value there's going to be in your second round of a Superflex league. I mean, Rashod Bateman, Rondale Moore, Tylan Wallace, Kenneth Gainwell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, like Jamar Jefferson, like Michael Carter, Kylan Hill, who I actually just did a scouting evaluation on this past week and came away really impressed with his ability as a receiving threat out of the backfield. All of these guys are going to be there for you in your second, third round of your Superflex drafts, and that is just crazy value. So let's talk about now some of the guys that we could potentially flip for one of those second round rookie picks in Superflex League, third round picks in Superflex Leagues, the sell now before it's too late. And this is important in Dynasty Leagues, and this is part of the strategy, part of the game, is knowing when to get out on these players before their stock just takes a drastic hit. Now, a qualification before we get into this is that when Ray and I bring up these guys, it's not like we are saying that their stock is going to, they're not going to have a starting job next week, right? Like, they might still be fantasy relevant for a little while into the future, but yet you're passing off the risk and passing off the percentage chances that they take it, that their situation changes or that they're no longer the same player, or for whatever qualification we want to say, you're passing that risk off to someone else and getting more youth on your roster, or taking someone who has less questions surrounding them, things like this. So the players that we're going to mention here are not bad players. They can still be very fantasy relevant for the long term or short term or whatever. We're going to break that down. But yet it is important to note that we're saying it might be time to get out on these guys. So Ray and I have selected each 5 players here, and we're just going to go down from 5 to 1. We're going to work our way down. So Ray, I'll throw it to you first. I think you got a spicy name here to start us off here. So number 5 player that you're saying sell now before it's too late. Who are we going with?
Yeah, I'm staying here in my hometown of Dallas, Texas, and I'm going Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. And listen, I understand that he's still a very productive rusher, but he just has not been the same running back, and partly because the Dallas Cowboys don't have as dominant of an offensive line. There are question marks around Dak Prescott. You've got Mike McCarthy, who seems he wants to throw the ball all over the place. And at times, it seems that towards the end of the season, it seems like Dallas really preferred Tony Pollard in some situations to get him on the field. So the thing with the running back position in Dynasty is when they fall off of a cliff, it is not like a slow ladder down. It's not like stairs down, a slow decline. It seems like these guys just fall off the face of the mountain like instantaneously, and their value just drops. I mean, there are some players that we're going to talk about. It just seems like, just the other day they were, top 10 Dynasty startup picks, top first-round picks,
right.
And now you won't even touch them with a 10-foot pole. So for me, Zeke going into what's he going into, year 5, year 6? I just think this is around the time where you start looking at shopping some of these running backs. And I wouldn't trade him for a second-round pick, but if I can get a mid to high first rounder in 2020, if I can trade out Ezekiel Elliott for Najee Harris, which nobody will do, but maybe a Javonte Williams plus a little something, I would definitely consider making that move.
It's a jarring name to hear you say sell now before it's too late with Ezekiel Elliott, right? Because the perception is, well, he's still one of the best, at least like initial reaction is he's still one of the top 5 most valuable fantasy running backs. But then when you stop and you think about it a little bit more, you remember, like you said, they were favoring Tony Pollard over him towards the end of last season. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott was borderline. You can't play him any given week last year, right? Like as a top 24 option, if you roll him into your lineup, you're playing with fire. Now, so the value on him, that's going to be my question to you, Ray, is like, is his value too low where you might actually have to hold him? Because selling him away, dude, I don't think you're getting a mid to high first round pick. You might have to settle for a second round pick. At that point, I don't know if I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, I think that I saw somebody tweet this out yesterday, and I really wish I could remember who it was, but they said basically you hold Zeke, you let him go off the first 3-4 weeks of the season, and at that point in time, you move him. Right now, you're right. You probably couldn't trade him for Travis Etienne straight up or Javonte Williams straight up, but week 3, week 4, if he goes out there and performs well, that's your window of opportunity to move a player like Zeke.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the situation. I think, it's not sell right now, but it is at least putting this player putting Zeke on people's radar to say, like, get rid of him as soon as you can capitalize on value, because the future is a huge question mark. You just don't know when exactly he's going to tail off again, or even if he will come back to, that top 5 perception. So you certainly started off with a more spicy name than I'm going to bring up. Mine is James Conner. And you talk about a running back who, their value will fall off a cliff. Yeah, it's happening for James Conner. Yeah. And I think it's been a slow, steady decline for the past couple of seasons, and now it's about to fall off a cliff. So James Conner, unlikely to be back with Pittsburgh this offseason. I see no reason why they would bring him back. And now heading into next year, it's hard to look across the NFL and say, who is going to bring in James Conner and give him the majority of the workload? So a couple years ago, we were holding out hopes and we were riding high on James Conner, saying that he's going to be this, workhorse back in Pittsburgh. He's taken over for Le'Veon Bell. It's fantastic. It's great. And now 2 years later, 3 years later, whatever it's been, we're saying just sell him for whatever you can get, in my opinion. Like, a couple of months ago in my main Dynasty league, I sold Mark Ingram for a 2023 fourth-round pick. Like, about as low of a value as you can get. Yeah. And I still feel like I kind of won that trade. Like, that's just kind of how I'm viewing it, because Mark Ingram at this point, a release from the Ravens, he might sign as a depth piece somewhere else, or he might just straight up retire and go into broadcasting, which I think he absolutely should do. But I think James Conner is kind of at that same spot where it's like, I might just be willing to take anything. If I can package him in another trade as sort of like a, lower tier package offer, absolutely sign me up to do that. But really, I just want James Conner off my Dynasty rosters at this point.
Listen, Yates, every time I hear that name, I literally have PTSD, like post-trade stress, whatever, disorder, because I traded James Conner. I traded Justin Jefferson for James Conner straight up week 2 of the Dynasty season last year. And I literally want to cry right now when I see his name. What was I listen, sometimes, folks, here's a piece of advice. Sometimes just put the damn phone down. Put the phone down. Don't check the trades late at night. Just don't do it, okay? Connor, get him off my roster. I don't want him anymore. Good call. Get rid of him for whatever you can get.
Yeah, all right. Let's go to your number 4 player.
All right, at number 4, I have actually a really productive player from 2020, and that's Adam Thielen, wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings. He's a player who, he's entering, year 8 of his career, and we know that Justin Jefferson it should be the number 1 wide receiver in Minnesota. Irv Smith's ascension to hopefully be a bigger part of that Minnesota offense. Thielen is still a very productive player, but he's definitely on the back 9 of his career opposed to the front 9. He's a player that I do think still holds value for especially those teams that are competing for a fantasy championship in this upcoming 2021 season. He still has some value. Again, one of those things, like you said about Zeke Elliott, what can you realistically get for Thielen right now? I don't know many people who would probably trade you a second straight up for him, but if you could get something like that for Thielen, I would do that. Or he's the perfect complementary piece to a bigger deal to help push it through and get it done.
Yeah, and I think, as I talked about before we even started mentioning names here, is Adam Thielen is still going to be fantasy relevant for the next couple of years. Like, I think Justin Jefferson, of course, has ascended and is going to take over the majority of the targets there and stuff like that. But Adam Thielen is still a fantastic wide receiver. So this is not a recommendation of sell now because, hey, guess what? He's not going to be productive in 2021 or whatever. No, he's still going to be productive. But what Ray is saying is get him off your roster now because the end is coming, right? Yeah. The end is near, and so get rid of him now and capitalize on the value as much as you can before another year goes by and then Minnesota decides to release him or whatever. And then at that point, he's a depth piece, a depth signing somewhere else, right? At that point, then you're holding something in your hand that's essentially nothing, right? Get something while you can. Yeah. And if you can, the name value still has worth. So package him in another deal. Get Adam Thielen off your rosters. I agree with that one, man. If I'm especially a young rebuilding roster, I'm selling him off to someone who is looking to compete for next year and is willing to send away a second-round pick or whatever, or move multiple pieces or whatever. So love the call there. Again, I'm going to go back to the running back position and a very similar name to James Conner. And that is Chris Carson, the running back for the Seattle Seahawks for the past couple of seasons. He, heading into this year, which was a contract year for him, his whole thing was, I want to prove that I can stay healthy to get that big contract from Seattle. And we saw him fight. There are very few players who I think fight through injuries the way that Chris Carson does. Matthew Stafford is certainly up there, and I think he's in a whole other tier, but Chris Carson battles, man. He is just a hard-nosed player and fights through things. But at this point, at the running back position, he has taken way too much damage on his body. He can't stay healthy for a full 16-game season. So no NFL team heading into 2021 is going to say, very similar to James Conner, we're going to bring you in and we're going to make you the main guy. I think he's going to be part of a rotational backfield next season. He can still have value as a depth running back, an RB4, RB5 on your dynasty roster, but if you can turn him now and flip him for someone who is willing to buy in that, his best days are still ahead of him, he's going to get a massive contract, whatever, just put out to your league group text and say, hey, Chris Carson is available, or try to include him in another package, another trade, something like that. I think that now is the time to get him off your roster before it's too late.
Yeah, and I think, Carson might be one of those guys. You probably should have tried to move him during the season, right? This is a player who was a, 6th, 7th round pick. They had
seventh-round pick, I think. Yeah.
7th-round pick. No intentions of re-signing him. They drafted Rashod Penny. And then his physical running style, and this is part of the reason why Ezekiel Elliott scares me. Like there are very few players that could just sustain those blows week after week, year after year, without breaking down. And Chris Carson is broken down, and I don't think it's going to get any better for him. So, listen, he's one of those players. If I can get a 3rd rounder for him, send him to a contending team, I would take that. And it's just, this is the nature of the running back position. It happens a lot quicker than it does with some of these wide receivers. And, get him off of your roster. And I just have to say this, because as I'm talking about a lot of my guys, right, most of my guys, the way that I categorize them are, I would rather be a year early on moving a player than a year too late. Because had you moved, let's take Chris Carson, for example, if you moved him prior to this season, you definitely would have received more value than you can right now. And some of the players that I'm talking about, Kyle, you just said it, they're still very good fantasy options. For me personally, I just would rather be a year too early than a year too late. And for me, but the 3rd player I have on this list, I actually switched it up because I think Michael Thomas, I can't believe he's 28 years old already. It seems like he's only been in the league a couple of years, but the uncertainty at the quarterback position, there were moments of the season where we were uncertain if Michael Thomas was going to be in New Orleans long term. I just don't know. He's not tethered to Drew Brees anymore. At least we don't think he is. And I know he still was able to gobble up targets and volume with Taysom Hill like one of the weeks or a couple of the weeks. But he's just a player for me. If I can trade Michael Thomas, I would. I mean, if you had him on your team for the past couple of years and got all those receptions out of him and touchdowns, kudos to you. But he's another one of those players. I mean, he's 28 years old already, and it seems like he's only been in the league a couple of years. So, Michael Thomas, great player, and he's still a very, very good fantasy asset, but I'd be just fine moving him.
Yeah, I think a side of the argument against trading away Michael Thomas would be, well, what if they, because Taysom Hill is the quarterback right now that's going to be presumed. The assumption right now is that Drew Brees retires. That hasn't officially happened yet. They've restructured his contract. But the argument would be, well, what if Jameis Winston? What if they re-sign Jameis Winston and he's the quarterback in 2021 for New Orleans? Well, we've seen Jameis do phenomenal things for wide receivers in the past. Obviously, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, to name a couple. So, but when we look at the situation, they've restructured several different players. Like they just restructured Will Lutz's contract, the kicker. They're still slated to be like $60 million over the cap. So the probability of New Orleans re-signing Jameis Winston, I think, is very, very low.
Yep.
And if that is the case, then you are looking at Taysom Hill being the quarterback next season. Now, you mentioned it. Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas seem to have a little bit of a connection there for a couple of games, but the true value of Michael Thomas, the name, I think, carries more weight right now than the production. And even though Michael Thomas certainly had a down year, I think that you can still capitalize on the name value where people don't realize, like you said, that he's 28 years old. That's something that has shocked me. I found that out a couple weeks ago, or like came across it again and was just like, man, I thought he was like 25, 26, right? Like, no, 28 years old right now. So if you can flip him for a first-round pick, and that late first-round pick in a Superflex league can turn into Jalen Waddle, like we just saw in the rookie mock that we did, absolutely, sign me up. Because I think that is, I'm willing to play those percentage chances where Jalen Waddle turns out to be a better fantasy asset in the near future rather than Michael Thomas long-term. So I think Thomas will still have value, of course, but yet I'm going to play the percentage chances. So looking at now my number 3 player, I'm going to go with the quarterback position here and talk about in Superflex leagues. Now, there are still believers in Jared Goff, and I don't understand why exactly, but I put out a poll on Twitter maybe a month ago now, and there were people who were saying that I will trade a 2021 first-round pick to acquire Jared Goff. And at that point, dude, sign me. I will send you all the Jared Goff shares that I have, because he was just traded away from a massive contract. They sent away a first-round pick to get rid of Jared Goff. And Detroit is sitting there heading into a multi-year rebuild that number 7 overall in the NFL draft this year, quarterback is absolutely on the table for them. Jared Goff is not the long-term answer here for the Detroit Lions. And I've actually never been super impressed with Jared Goff. I don't think that he's an actually good NFL quarterback. And last year in the FantasyPros Dynasty Invitational League, I sent away to acquire Joe Burrow, who had fallen in the rookie draft to the 104. I made a massive trade with Elliott Christ, and I sent away the 108, Terry McLaurin, Jared Goff, and my first-round pick this year to go acquire Joe Burrow, because I was that much of Jared Goff was as a rebuilding Superflex roster, I don't care. I don't want him on my roster. I'm going to get rid of him. And now you're telling me that his value is actually perceived higher now because he was traded. I don't understand it. So get Jared Goff off my roster, man, because I don't think that there's a very good possibility that he's not even the starting quarterback for this roster in 2021.
Yeah. Listen, there's a quarterback that you like. I believe he's from the Detroit area or from Michigan. Isn't Trey Lance from that area? I mean, I could definitely see Detroit. What if they take Trey Lance at number 8 overall? I mean, at that point, and this is the strategy of Dynasty. You have to be thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. And if you are savvy, you will know, or you should realize, that Jared Goff probably is not going to be the long-term answer. So if his value has increased because of this trade, move him. Period. Trade him. This is right now. Do it before the end of it. And this is a move you probably want to make before the draft and just hedge that in case they do draft a quarterback. Right. Because if Detroit takes a quarterback, your Goff shares have crumbled. You won't be able to move him for anything. Yeah. So I love this. I mean, you could have had this guy at number 1 for you, Yates, and I would have been spot on. But for me, at number 2, another one of those big names, one of the most productive wide receivers to start his career in NFL history, and his name value, I still believe it holds enough weight that you can trade him, and that's Mike Evans. Mike Evans, Tampa Bay just won a Super Bowl, and it feels like Evans was barely involved week to week. I think he caught a couple of passes in the Super Bowl. Just Tom Brady's, as long as he's the quarterback, I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to, honestly. I don't know if it's going to be a Gronk game, a Scotty Miller game, an Antonio Brown game. You just don't know. Mike Evans, again, I think 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. It's still Mike Evans. He plays on Tampa Bay. But if I could pivot off of a Mike Evans, and let's just say hypothetically I can get a late first, and I can go from Mike Evans to Rashod Bateman, Mike Evans to Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans to potentially a Travis Etienne, I'm taking that deal. And I'm okay with him producing another 1,000-yard season. I just think the dominant Mike Evans is the alpha 1,500-yard seasons. I don't think we're going to see that out of him anymore. So for me in Dynasty, I'm okay with moving him.
I actually think you can get a late first plus something for Mike Evans because of how he finished the season. Now, people, again, we suffer from short-term memory loss. We're all Dories from Finding Nemo in Dynasty, right, where we look back on fantasy football and we can't remember what the first part of the season was like. And Mike Evans was not good for fantasy football. He was catching the 1 reception for 2 yards and a touchdown. Do you remember this? Yes. This was this past season. And
yes.
Obviously, that changed towards the end of the season. He started to become more productive. Him and Tom Brady started to click, and things started to figure out. So, again, there is risk with trading away Mike Evans, where that would be sort of like the situation where, you're looking out the windshield or the window and it's raining and you're watching Mike Evans put up another 1,000-yard season or whatever, because he is an extremely talented wide receiver. Yes. It's not taking away anything from Mike Evans, but when you can take the percentage chances and say, what happens if he does go back to only catching the 1 pass for 2 yards in the touchdown, or the touchdown doesn't happen. There was very little consistency with Mike Evans last season, and if I can get a player who I think is going to be more consistent long-term, I'm willing to take that short-term hit to get that long-term gain. For me, David Johnson at number 2 is going to be a player. Now, we talked about him as far as having the restructured deal, so he's still got people in his camp still people that are fans of him that are going to be pumping him up. We're going to see it when we hit June, July. People are going to be putting out articles and saying David Johnson is a value as an RB2 yet again. And for me, I don't care. I get him off my roster. I don't want David Johnson at this point. Like, I really just don't care. I don't want David Johnson. So I'm willing to take. I don't think that you should sell him for just anything. I don't think it's kind of the same level as a James Conner or a Chris Carson. I think you can get a second round, third round rookie pick, especially in a Superflex league. So if that is the case, then I'm shipping David Johnson off. I don't care who that running back turns into at that spot or whatever. Like, I just want, because I think it's going to, the end is like the falling off a cliff. I think is happening sooner than later.
I mean, it just seems like just yesterday, David Johnson was like 1,000 and 1,000 candidate. You know what I mean? He signs this mega deal in Arizona, and then that run. You know what run I'm talking about, Yates. It just seemed the run. I think you tweeted that run.
It was me. Yeah, that was like my main. That's like my most interacted tweet. Like, it was just a clip from Game Pass. It had something like 30,000. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
The run, and I would run as loosely is that's. He did not.
I'm gonna go look that up right now. Actually,
he did not run, but David Johnson is. Gosh, it's a sad tale, man. This is what happens in Dynasty. But I'm gonna go ahead and close out my sell now. And this one is even more. I think one of the players. I've got a tie up top, so I've got two quarterbacks. I've got Aaron Rodgers and. That should be pretty self-explanatory, right? Aaron Rodgers is 37, going on 38. Is still at the peak of his powers. I mean, he's the reigning NFL MVP. And if you can get a first-round pick for him and to, send him to a team, and Aaron Rodgers is not going to work for a rebuilding squad. But in a Superflex league, if a team has a Patrick Mahomes and they just lost the fantasy title and they've got the 111 now because they finished second, and you're telling them, look, you give me that 111 and I'll upgrade your quarterback to Aaron Rodgers. I mean, those are deals you can get done. You have to strategically think about who you're moving these players to. But Aaron Rodgers is a player, I don't even know if he's going to be in Green Bay after next season, if he's going to retire, what's going to happen. So I'm fine with moving the 4,500-yard passer, 40 TD Aaron Rodgers to a team that wants to make a push for a championship. And this one right here, listen, this is the epitome of, good and well, if you trade this player, you're going to trade him for a haul. Somebody will pay it, and he's probably got like 4 to 5 peak years left. But Russell Wilson, I've seen him, fall from like QB5 in Dynasty startups to QB11, QB12, and he's still at the peak of his powers. Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, future Hall of Famer. But in Dynasty, I think you can get a lot for Russell Wilson right now. And if you're telling me I could potentially get younger at quarterback and upgrade, so, if I could walk away with 2 first-round picks and walk away with Trey Lance and Devonte Smith, or Trey Lance and Javonte Williams or whatever, Russell Wilson, me in Dynasty, I'll trade anybody. I don't care. And Russell Wilson, for me, is a player that there are so many young, talented quarterbacks in the league. I'm perfectly fine with taking the risk of moving off of an aging veteran for a younger potential stud quarterback plus for a player like Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers specifically because you're always going to have the people in your Dynasty league who are playing like the next year is the last year that the league is in existence, right? As far as like they are going all in, they're pushing all their they have no first round picks for the next 5 seasons. Like they are acquiring the veteran players, the guys who can help them win right now. And so Aaron Rodgers absolutely fits the bill. Even in 1 QB leagues, I've seen him shipped around a ton for these rosters that think that they are just a 1 quarterback away from competing right for a championship. So absolutely, if you can ship him off, if you are a young and rebuilding roster, even if you aren't, if you still have some stability at the quarterback position, I'm willing to trade away Aaron Rodgers because yes, it's kind of a similar thing where with Mike Evans, you're probably going to have to watch him put up another 4,500 yard and 40 touchdown and 4 interceptions. Like, you're probably going to have to watch that happen next season. But as far as what happens after that, it lines up exactly with what you were saying of a year early on this player versus a year late. So love the call there with Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to go with a player that this is going to hurt if I actually do end up sending this person away, but I do think that it is in the best interest of my Dynasty roster, and that's Julio Jones. Julio Jones, at this point of his career, yes, the amount of games that he has missed is very, very few, but he's in that same category of the guys that just battle through injuries, right? I can't remember the last game that we went into where I didn't get the news alert that Julio Jones was questionable, right? Like it feels like that was 4 years ago, and it actually legitimately might have been. So Julio, at this point of his career, he is starting to near the end. Who knows how long he's going to be able to continue to battle through the way that he has. We saw guys like Calvin Johnson just say, like, I can't do it anymore. Like, I can't continue to battle through these injuries as much as I have. And I think Julio Jones is sort of getting near that point. Now, again, you're going to have to watch him. If he does continue to battle through at least even next year, you're going to have to watch him put up a 1,000-yard season. It's Julio Jones. Yep. He's one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. So you're going to have to watch that happen. But being a year early on selling Julio Jones, you can still capitalize on the name value for a competing roster to be able to get a first-round pick. You're going to be able to get a first-round pick for Julio Jones in your Dynasty League. So I think you got to do this, because being able to ship him out now versus waiting a year and then finding out that he retires, or that Atlanta moves on and they're entering it, whatever, like at that point I'm willing to move him now, even though it does pain me to move a talented player like Julio Jones.
Yep. I agree, and I've been saying, and it's when Julio's on the field and playing, he's probably the best receiver in the NFL, right? But good grief, I mean, every week he's limping off the field. You don't know if he's going to finish the game. He's on the injury report. You don't know if he's going to play the game. Atlanta looks like they're a couple of months away from a full just rebuild, right? No Matt Ryan, no Julio Jones, no Todd Gurley. They've got a new coach. He's a player. If you can still trade Julio for anything, and I think you could probably get, a high second, late first for Julio to one of those teams who are still going all in, you got to move him, be fine with him going off next season.
Absolutely. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's show. Again, thank you so much to Reality Sports Online for sponsoring today's podcast. Head over to realitysportsonline.com to find out what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Anything else before we get out of here, Bray?
Nah, man, this was a good show. This was good. I think the people will enjoy this one, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to be honest, guys, I'm going to go to sleep right now because I'm exhausted. I'm tired for some reason. I don't know what it is. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your support. The Apple Podcast reviews are just continuing to pour in. We're so appreciative. If you have just a second, make sure to head over to Apple Podcasts or CastBox and leave a rating and review. It helps us out in a big, big way. And you can also find and watch the podcast on youtube.com/fantasypros as well. For Ray Garvin, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time. Looking for useful content, fantasy-relevant information, and the data that can help your team win? Then make sure to subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook @FantasyPros so we can help you dominate your league all season long.